Good evening. I'm Sherry Boston, DeKalb County District Attorney, and I want to thank you for joining us. As many of you know, today in the matter of State versus Robert Olsen, defendant Robert Olsen was sentenced to 20 years to serve 12 years in custody with the balance on probation by DeKalb County Superior Court Judge Letitia Deere Jackson. The state recommended the maximum sentence of 30 years to serve 25 in custody with the balance on probation, which we believe was appropriately aligned with the penalty range associated with the offenses for which this defendant was convicted. While we were hoping for a sentence closer to our recommendation, we are grateful that Mr. Olsen will spend time behind bars and be held accountable for all of his actions. We believe a measure of justice for Anthony Hill has been served and his family's voice has been heard. You'll recall that a little more than 2 weeks ago, on October 14, 2019, a DeKalb County jury convicted defendant Olsen of aggravated assault, making a false statement, and 2 counts of violation of oath of office by a public officer in connection with the shooting death of 26-year-old Anthony Hill. Let me pause for a moment to say thank you to the men and women of the jury. I'm appreciative of their time and thoughtful deliberation of the evidence in this case. While they did not convict on the charges of felony murder, their verdict on the underlying felonies set the stage for this defendant to be held accountable for his actions that resulted in the deadly consequences. Much has been said about March 9th, 2015, so I won't spend a lot of time on the recitation of the facts. What we know about that day is that Anthony Hill, Tony Hill, was unarmed and unclothed, was a man in the midst of a mental health crisis and in need of assistance. Instead, Tony, an Air Force veteran, a son, a brother, a friend, a young man full of promise and hope, was tragically shot and killed, his young life abruptly cut short at the hands of Officer Robert Olsen. We believe that the deadly force Mr. Olsen used to subdue Tony was excessive, unreasonable, unnecessary, and against law enforcement protocol and training. Thankfully, with the sentence imposed by Judge Deere Jackson today, defendant Olsen will pay the price for his reckless actions and the lies he told in an attempt to cover them up. Let me take a moment to say that this case is not an indictment against all police officers. We believe our law enforcement partners are hardworking, dedicated professionals who put their lives on the line every day and make sacrifices many of us never have to consider. We also understand that this job requires quick judgment calls and split-second decisions. However, we believe those decisions and resulting actions should be appropriate and sound. And if they are not, officers who run afoul of these expectations should be held accountable. Officers should not operate outside of established boundaries and protocols. A badge, a uniform, a gun are not a license to shoot and kill with impunity. We believe Robert Olsen had non-lethal options that he could have employed, but he made a different decision on that day, and that cost Tony Hill his life. Today, we say Tony Hill's name with honor and respect because his life mattered. Now, to a few remarks centered in gratitude. I want to publicly thank the team that you see standing to my left. A team of amazing prosecutors who stand with me today. Pete Johnson, our Chief Assistant District Attorney, Major Case Director Lance Cross, Deputy Chief Assistant District Attorney Buffy Thomas, Assistant District Attorney Lenny Crick, Victim Advocate Tina Williamson, and Deputy Chief Investigator Steve Barassi. Those members of our team have worked tirelessly with unparalleled work ethic, dedication, and passion in seeking justice for Tony Hill. They each poured their everything into this case without complaint, which included long days, nights, weekends, holidays, personal and family sacrifices made with one goal in mind: justice for Anthony Hill. Which brings me to Mr. Hill's incredible family. I am so grateful for their patience in the midst of legal and technical delays, which would stretch this journey in search of justice longer than any of us wished. They too have held their peace and maintained their composure throughout it all. I am grateful for their support, their encouragement, and trust in our team and in our commitment to the pursuit of justice for their beloved Tony. Finally, we appreciate the investigative work of the GBI in the preliminary stages of this case. And as always, we appreciate and value our partnership with the DeKalb County Police Department and our other partnering law enforcement agencies. We could not do the work that we do without their support and their cooperation. While we know that the public lens is focused on several narratives, white versus black, police versus civilian, armed versus unarmed, our hope is that there are larger takeaways. The need for comprehensive and ongoing training related to evaluating and handling calls involving mental health issues, employing non-lethal approaches to de-escalating situations when warranted, and strengthening our law enforcement and community relations. We promise to continue to work with local citizens, community leaders, our partnering law enforcement agencies to address these critical issues. By working together, we can improve the quality of life in DeKalb County and make our community a safer place for everyone. At this time, I'd like to bring up Ms. Jumo, Tony's mother, for a few remarks. And then after she has spoken, we'll open up the floor for questions.
First of all, I would like to thank everyone, especially the team that we had that was fighting for justice for my son, our son, brother, nephew, grandson, Anthony Hill. I also would like to thank the groups that rallied, stood out in the rain for the many years since 2015. I would like to thank them too. I also would like to thank Aaron Echoes, the first person on the scene after my son was killed, who did the legwork, knocked door on door, talked to people, and brought awareness of what was actually going on and what had happened from the witnesses. I would like to thank the media, the ones that were there for me, who spoke the truth, who printed the truth, and was there to tell the story, and just not any story, but the truth, the correct story. I'd like to thank my family. It's been hard, it's been rough, and they have put up with everything. We put our lives on hold for 4.5 years. We do not live here, so we're always traveling. We live all over. No one lives in DeKalb County. I'm very appreciative to them, and I love them dearly. I think that's about all. No, there's one more thing I wanted to say. Fight for justice for Anthony Hill. Even though I didn't get what I wanted the maximum. Some time is better than no time. But if I'm truly happy about it, I'm not. But I have to accept what was given. But if I could, I would want the maximum. Thank you.
At this time, we'll open up the floor for questions.
I have a question. So he is sentenced to 20 years. He's serving 12 years. Is there a possibility that he will get out for good behavior and he won't actually even serve the full 12 years?
When he's eligible for parole will be up to the Board of Pardons and Parole. So they will make that determination.
This question's directed to the family. With this case mirroring the Geiger trial, she was found guilty as well as Mr. Olsen. Did the outcome of that sentencing have any effect on what you were expecting today?
No, because one thing about me, I don't compare or judge anything and what I feel. And I say that because I held Robert Olsen for what he did. I didn't let that set the tone for other police officers because I love my police officers. So I really didn't pay attention to that, and you can't compare them. They're two different things.
It's Elena from WAD, but what kind of precedent do you think this case sets for other young black men in this country?
I really couldn't answer that. You probably have to ask a black young man. I can answer as a mother that mothers probably would tell their sons to be careful, be sensible, run away from trouble. And like I said, it's not to bash police officers because I still believe when you're in trouble, you need to, if a police officer go to them, you can't be accountable for each person. You just have to understand this doesn't set the tone of how I view other people. But maybe Mr. Hill would like to answer that question.
Can you please repeat your question?
Yes, sure. I was wondering what kind of reflection this is on, what kind of precedent this sets for young black men in this country.
Well, until you have other black men stand up and stand on that jury and actually take accountability for actually standing on that jury and taking the responsibility of rendering a guilty verdict, this is what we're going to get. You're fighting an uphill battle, and you're going to have more young black men get killed out there. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to sit here and go at the officers or anything like that. But the reality is, it has happened in the past. It will happen again in the future. And until you get people who are willing to stand up and do what is right, and not, run away from their responsibility, their civic responsibility, this is what you're going to get. I mean, it's a step in the right direction, but it's not where we need to be.
Mr. Hill, how do you feel about that one black male juror on this case who said he compromised felony murder to get some time or to get a conviction, even though he wanted felony murder?
You asking how I feel?
Yeah, that one juror, is that the type of speaking up that you're talking about? I mean, do you think he made a difference in your case? How pivotal was his role?
Well, if in fact it was exactly the way he said, and like I said, none of us were in there. If it was exactly the way he said, then you have to honor him for what he did, because he stuck up for what he stuck by his guns and stuck up for what he believed in. Now, you had a bunch of other cowards that were sitting in that room that didn't do the same. So he's one person. Now, I don't know if what he did was what actually got us to where we are right now. I don't know. I mean, none of us were there. But let's say, just for the sake of argument, that he did actually do that. And that is what got us here. You have to commend him for that, because he stuck by his guns and did what he was there to do. He honored his oath, and he did what he was there to do.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
you had said you wanted Robert Olsen to look at you. What were you hoping to hear from him? What did you want him to say?
I didn't necessarily want to hear him say anything, man. I mean, we're all human beings. And you see someone that has done wrong, right? And I know I've done wrong in the past. And I may not have said the words, but I can look at you, and you know when a person is really sorry, is when you really feel it. He didn't have to say a word to me. You could just make eye contact, and I would know. I would know. I'm human. I'm human, and at no point did I see it, none whatsoever. I mean, I understand the judicial system, excuse me, sorry about that, everybody, the judicial system. I know that he cannot speak. He cannot come and say anything to us while the trial is going on. But we walk past each other going to the restroom. I'm standing out there. You walk past me. You can make, I mean, you look at a person. I mean, and it's just that I'm sorry look. I mean, maybe you understand, maybe you don't. I don't know. Some of you may understand that. But it's just a look. You know, nothing ever came. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Does that mean you don't believe that he has remorse at all? What do you think?
My personal opinion, he may. He may have remorse. I mean, come on, he's human. He may have remorse, but I think that he knew what he did. And I think that he made a decision that he knew was wrong, but he chose to go forward with it. And, you know.
What about the false statement that was made? Does that make it any worse?
Yes. Yes, ma'am, it does. In my opinion, yes, it does. It makes it worse. Because think about it for a second. You come into a parking lot, okay? You stop. You see the person that you're there for, kneeling down. You could have stopped where you were. You knew backup was on the way. You knew what you were there for. G22, whatever it was. Whatever it was, G22, whatever, let you know that your person was in a demented state. He's new. You see him. You have him in sight. You know backup is on the way, minutes away. You're standing in front of the building that you say you want a number of. But you chose to drive around and come around the other way so that you can get the same number that you're standing right next to. That didn't make any sense. So that was a lie.
Do you blame the police department for their lack of...
The police department?
Well, for their lack of action against the complaints that were filed against him previously, all those times, and you never really disciplined him harsh enough for him to be out there and it happened to your son?
The police department?
Well, just the administrative, well, just because of the complaints that he had received in the past, the extensive complaints.
Administratively, I think that there were some failures. However, I think those were individual failures. I don't think that was a departmental failure. I don't think that was just a blanket statement for an entire department. I think that you had a few individuals that may have made a mistake. And who they are, none of us will ever know.
Carolyn?
Yes.
I think a lot of people were expecting to hear from him today, and he didn't. Would you have liked to have heard what he had to say?
Yes, I would have. That would have been something I wish I could have sit down and talked to him and asked him, you know, what actually happened. Tell me the truth. Why did you do that? I would want to hear what he had to say. I don't know why he chose not to talk or why he wasn't allowed. I don't know the procedure, but I was hoping he was going to get on the stand to defend what he did. He didn't.
And to say you're sorry, I guess, or express some remorse.
I mean, he could say he's sorry. 4.5 years ago, he could have said he was sorry. It probably would have meant more then. But a sorry, I would take any sorry. Not saying that I will forget, but a sorry means you at least thought about what you did and you feel maybe you didn't do everything right, so I'm sorry. That's what I take a sorry as. But it's been 4.5 years and he doesn't look me in the eye, you know.
Do you want to hear from him now?
Right now, at this moment, it really wouldn't matter. Because sorry comes to me when you're sorry, not because you got the consequences and then say you're sorry. You can say you're sorry, but it doesn't have the same weight for me. I still would accept it, but it doesn't have the same weight as when it happened. It's like you got your hand in a cookie jar. If you don't get caught, okay, but once you get caught, oh, I'm sorry. When you could say sorry when you knew you wasn't supposed to do that. So.
Maybe this might be a question for the family, could be a question for someone on the legal team. Does it seem as if Robert Olsen gambled and won here because he turned down that plea offer?
I don't think we can speculate about gambling. Clearly, we pushed forward and felt strongly that a murder charge was the appropriate charge in this case, which is why the offer, although it was for 15, was, as Mr. Johnson stated, for him to plead guilty. to manslaughter, to voluntary manslaughter, and to accept responsibility that the actions he took were murder. And so they challenged that, as they had the right to do. And we always knew that, as you saw, this jury deliberated for 6 days. We see this all over the country, not just here in Georgia, that getting a murder conviction against an officer for shooting a private citizen is extremely difficult. It's not an easy path, and I am grateful for my team for all the work that they put in. And again, just by getting the aggravated assault conviction allowed us to be even having this conversation today. I think what you see too often across the nation right now is full acquittals on the serious charges, the felony murders, the manslaughters, the aggravated assaults, which only leave minor charges like a violation of oath of office. But this jury did speak loudly and clearly, despite the fact that they wrestled with the murder charge, but they did hold Robert Olsen accountable for Tony Hill's death by saying guilty to aggravated assault, guilty to violation of oath, guilty to making false statements, covering up his crimes. And so with that, we were able to seek a measure of justice for him and for this family.
The judge in her sentence, she invoked the Son of Sam ruling about making profit off of his death.
Yes.
I don't normally hear judges add that as part of the sentence. Is this something? Was there something that you guys knew about, like a deal or something?
No, I am not aware of any offers of book deals or movies or any interviews that Mr. Olsen can profit from. Why the judge did that, I won't speculate. I can just say that I think she was just making it clear that if there were that opportunity, given the high-profile nature of this case, she wanted the record to reflect very specifically that there should be no profit from this family's loss.
Do you know what the specific breakdown of each count as it relates to the entire 20-year sentence is?
Yes. I'm going to bring up Deputy Chief Assistant Buffy Thomas because she actually saw the sentence sheet, unlike the rest of us.
Hi, good afternoon. So as it relates to the breakdown of the sentence, as to count 3, which is the aggravated assault count, the judge imposed a sentence of 15 years to serve 12 years in custody. So he will serve 12 years in custody. The remaining 3 years will be on probation. As to count 4, which was the violation of oath of office by a public officer, she sentenced him to 5 years in custody to run concurrent with the custodial portion of count 3. Count 5, which was the false statement charge, merged with count 6, which was the violation of oath of office by a public officer, and she sentenced him to 5 years probation as to that count to run consecutive to the sentences in counts 3 and 4.
All right. If there are one last question, and we'll wrap it up.
Do we have any idea where he'll go? What prison he'll be sent to?
We do not. That will be a decision made by the Department of Corrections after they diagnose and make a decision on the best place for him to go.
One last one. ADA Johnson talked often about the community. You brought it up often, meaning to the judge. And so the judge was looking out at the community while doing this. In bringing that up, could you explain as to what you were trying to impart to the judge?
Just what I said.
To the mic.
Which was that, this is the type of case that the community looks at, and we, as the prosecutor's office, have to ensure that justice is done and justice is met, no matter who you are, whether you're a police officer or a regular citizen. And that's why I wanted to bring up the community so that doesn't get lost in this. Sometimes our victims and members of the community get lost in it, and all we talk about are the defendants. Defendants are important. That's appropriate sentencing with defendants is absolutely 100% important, and we work towards that every day in this office, towards doing things that are appropriate and not just, rubber stamping. But in these types of cases, like it's been heard already, many times we don't hear much about the victim and the victim's family. We hear about the police officers, or we don't hear about the community that's been torn apart, where they are now afraid sometimes to call 911 because of what could happen, and we want to fix that. And so one of the ways was to bring it to the judge's attention and let her be aware of that when she decided on whatever the appropriate sentence was.
D.A. Johnson, you made a point to mention that there was no DeKalb County cops that came in to offer a statement on behalf of Olsen. What do you think about the witnesses that they brought up to speak on his behalf?
I mean, look, everybody has family and friends, and, the defendant, Robert Olsen's no different. He has family and friends that care about him, and they're the folks that are going to come in and speak on his behalf. I would expect everybody in this room could find, hopefully, a few people who would come in and speak on their behalf. And so, they did what they had to do, and I respect that. My job was just to kind of point out some of the issues with the case that we felt were important that they may not be aware of.
Pete, how do you feel about the sentencing?
We're disappointed, but we believe that the guilty verdict and the fact that we got as far as we did is great. That is something that I think, we look at cases across the country and we don't know sometimes going into these cases what's going to happen on the outcome. And the fact that a jury found him guilty, held him accountable, and that he will serve time in prison, and that there is some measure of solace for the family on that, we believe is a good thing.
Does this send a message to police departments, to police officers? We keep hearing about the split-second decisions. What will this do?
Well, what we never want to do is have police officers looking over their shoulder when they're out on the streets, because they do have a tough job, but they have to act reasonably. And I think you have a majority of officers out there, the men and women who work for DeKalb County and all the police departments here in Georgia do their job. And there's the few outliers that don't, and those are the ones that need to be held accountable. And what they need to know is if they don't, then they will be held accountable, and we'll prosecute as necessary based on what they do. We want people to think twice, too. I think that D.A. Boston brought it up, that the police department and the county have worked towards, since this happened, better training for the officers when dealing with situations like this, that they can de-escalate rather than escalate a situation. And so I think training and education are a big thing that they can do and that any department can do. And I think that the DeKalb County Police Department has done a great job of improving that since this happened back in 2015.
I just want to thank you for recognizing the supporters that were in the room, and there were 35 of us in the overflow room.
And as we wrap up, I am going to invite up Mr. Aaron Eccles just to give brief closing remarks on behalf of the family.
She said Aaron Eccles.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Eric.
It's Eric Eccles, private investigator. First of all, I want to say, and I want to thank Ms. Boston for the comment she made about teamwork. As a private investigator getting involved in a case like this, and turning my facts and evidence that I found over to the DA to secure an indictment. And then them taking that to the next step, which it brought Ms. Boston and her team in to secure the prosecution. It's a testament of someone who's in the private sector as an investigator can work in conjunction with the public sector, with the DA's office, for a common goal, which is justice. And that's the message that needs to be said here today. It's justice for Anthony Hill. And sometimes people out there in the community needs to know it's okay to talk. Oftentimes people don't want to talk, they don't want to give up information. It makes it difficult for a team like Ms. Boston's to prosecute different cases. Whereas someone on the public sector, on the private sector, such as myself, can go in and talk to them. But it shows there's a good working relationship. And at the end of the day, we got justice for Anthony Hill. And I think that's a testament to everybody.
Mr. Eccles, do you think that whatever level of investigation was done before you stepped into the scene, was that Was there little information brought forth because people wouldn't talk to police investigators, or because investigators weren't out there asking questions?
Well, I think it's a combination, more so that people didn't want to talk to police officers. When you have a history of events like this, where you look at the past and African Americans have been gunned down and shot by police officers, and then you look at the community in which Anthony Hill lived, and let's be honest, it's a Hispanic populated community. You know, there are a lot of people out there who probably weren't illegal. There were probably people, you know, I run across people who have warrants on them, and a lot of times those individuals just don't want to talk to the police officers. So it's not against the police officer or asking the right questions or going to the people. It's just a lot of times the people are afraid to talk to them. Whereas talking to myself or a private investigator, I'm not going to run you to see if you got warrants. I just want the truth, and then I want the facts to support it. And then that's what happened in this case.
Would we have been here today if you hadn't hit the ground running out there?
You know, I've asked myself that question, and let me say this. It was a joint effort of teamwork. I will say I think that the video with Anthony, with Robert Olsen pounding his chest that I found and gave to the DA's office was paramount to convicting him as lying under oath. But again, it was a team effort from myself to the old regime and to Sherry Boston and her great team of people.
Who were you working with? You were a private investigator.
Yes.
Were you doing it upon your own?
Well, at the
self,
time,
or
I
were you-
was hired by the Chestnut firm. I was working on behalf of on the civil case.
Okay.
And oftentimes, when I get involved in wrongful death cases or security negligence, premise liability cases, I find evidence that may be helpful to the police department, and I always give that information to them.
All right, thank you so much for your time and your attention.
Thank you.